Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here nearby to the grade of the former Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and later Canadian National Railway's Graham Subdivision. We're here in the southern part of the city of Thunder Bay, adjacent to this large Canadian Pacific, or I guess Canadian Pacific Kansas City yard. We're standing here on this pedestrian overpass that runs over the yard, basically taking it from sort of more the residential area into what used to be more of a industrial area here alongside the Kaministiquia River. And so you can see the Kaministiquia River, which is the very large, the largest river in the area, just to the south of us over here. And so this area here used to be the southern part of two separate cities. So Thunder Bay used to be two cities. So the northern part was Port Arthur and the southern part was Fort William. And this area, which was the western area of Fort William, was known as West Fort William, or Westfort for short. Now it's still referred to as that, and I grew up in Westfort, so I'm very, very familiar with that. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking a look at this particular part of the railway line, basically going from here all the way kind of to the north for about 4 miles or so. So what's interesting about this area, and I'm going to be showing you some stuff here on my phone because again we're shooting right into the sun. I do apologize, and I can't get any closer because there's sort of the rail yard and there's private property, so I can't go any further. But in this area right here, so you can see a building just over there. So right in that area here used to be the main station for the Grand Trunk Pacific. And that station was basically used from 1908 until 1919, when it became part of Canadian National Railways. Obviously there's nothing left anymore. Now there is some confusion with this, but because first of all there was a whole pile of milepost zeros on this line. There was one here, there's one that we're going to take a look at in another episode, which was the Union Station that Grand Trunk shared with Canadian Pacific. And then to the south, and we're going to mention this in another episode, is basically the terminal facilities on the south side of the river, adjacent to Fort William First Nation. So here, if you take a look at that 1908 timetable, I'm going to be showing that to you. You can basically see this is milepost 0. You can see that there's a station here. There's coal and water facilities here as well. What I think happened was eventually all of those facilities were shifted to the southern side of the river, to what became known as the Mission Terminal, once everything got built, because that first timetable came out right when the railway line opened, and probably a lot of the facilities on the southern part of the river were not ready yet. So anyway, so again, this did serve as the main sort of station. Again, it was kind of a real unique sort of situation, because again the terminal facilities with the roundhouse and the you know, with the turntable and the big yard were on the south side of the river, but basically all the people lived over here. So again, this was the main station. There was another station that they shared with Canadian Pacific. Now again, this whole area looks very, very different. There would have been, right behind that building, there would have been yet another grain elevator in front of the one that you can see, and that would have been Saskatchewan Pool 5. And not that I really remember a lot of it, but my dad used to work at Pool 5 basically from when he came to Canada in the early 50s until the early 70s, right around the time that I was born. And then he was transferred to another elevator. So the station was right in that area, probably just behind where you see that building there. And so as far as we know, that it was a Grand Trunk Type E station, was probably built around about 1910 or so, and again was used until 1919. I believe the building existed up until the early 60s, when I think it was sold off and it was demolished. Over here you can basically see this concrete area adjacent to the river. Those were, and I'm going to show you a map momentarily here, those were the I believe where the freight sheds were for the Grand Trunk, right? So you basically had a station over here, initially a water tank, coal facilities, and then you had a series of freight sheds over here. So what we're going to do is eventually we're going to make our way a little bit closer to the river, so we can take a look at things from over there. Okay, so we're down here at ground level again. Again, we can't go any further here because it is private property, but I just wanted to show you this. Probably can see a little bit better because we're not shooting into the sun. So again, the station would have been right in behind where that building that you can see in the distance, that green colored building. I don't know if you can make it out on the camera, right? So it would have been right in there. And again, these freight docks, these freight sheds would have been right in this particular area here, right? And you can kind of see that there's sort of a paved area here. Again, who knows what has changed in that time. Okay, so we're going to make our way over here closer to the river. And hopefully we can see a few things. Now again, this whole area is radically different than it would have been at the time. So this is where it gets a little bit sort of confusing. If we kind of work our way this way over here, you can see that there's this strip of grass running through sort of these paved over areas. And again, I don't know if that was the right of way of the Grand Trunk. You can see that green building sort of in the background, so there may have well been a sort of a rail line and possibly the Grand Trunk one coming through this area. It's very difficult to sort of pinpoint exactly where things were because again, everything has been sort of changed, right? There is kind of a little bit of a hump here, and so again, this could have been the right of way here. There is something over here. You can see this sign, and so this is the this is kind of a very important historic marker. So you can see Canada's first spike, June 1st, 1875, and there's a bunch of railway ties here. Some of them with spikes still in them. So this was where the purportedly where the Canadian Pacific Railway was initially constructed from. Again, I don't know what's kind of going on in this area. Obviously the Canadian Pacific line is over there, so I don't know if they started the Canadian Pacific here or if this was just shifted over here. Obviously you have all of these ties in this area here. There's some concrete here, right? So you have all these ties running in through here. So I don't know again what the deal was, whether the Grand Trunk line was here or if it was here, right? And you know, basically they used some old Canadian Pacific trackage, and there was a relationship between Grand Trunk and Canadian Pacific, even though they were sort of competing transcontinental railways, right? Again, there's more sort of concrete here. You can see the river beside us, and so the rail line would have run through this area somewhere here. Again, it's very difficult to sort of see anything, to sort of figure out where you were, right? So, right, you can imagine that rail line, whether it's here or it's there, running in this direction over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our way to the road, and then eventually make our way over there and basically take a look at where the rail line would have continued on and then eventually curved and joined in the main trunk, which is coming from the south side of the river, crossing over the bridge that you can see in the background. We're going to be taking a look at the bridge as well, and then heading to the north. Okay, so let's make our way westward here. So while I have a minute here, we're going to do our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by Grand Trunk Pacific between 1905 and 1908. The Grand Trunk Company was one of the oldest railway companies in Canada, dating back to 1852. So this railway line was part of an effort by Grand Trunk to build a second transcontinental railway across Canada. It had been a plan that had been in the works for many, many years. Problem was Grand Trunk really didn't want to build the whole thing by itself. So what they did was they formed a partnership with the Canadian government, whereby Grand Trunk would build the western portion of the line, basically going from Winnipeg to Prince Rupert on the coast of British Columbia under the name Grand Trunk Pacific. And the Canadian government would build the eastern half from Winnipeg to New Brunswick under the name National Transcontinental Railway, and the Grand Trunk would operate the NTR. This branch was a bit of an anomaly because it was a Grand Trunk line, so it was Grand Trunk Pacific, but it connected to the NTR because obviously it was east of Winnipeg. So again, construction began in 1905. So the Prime Minister at the time, Wilfrid Laurier, came here to do a sod turning, even though that they had Grand Trunk had done an official sod turning in Winnipeg. So this line was one of the first sections of the line to be built, and so again, construction began in 1905 and was completed in 1908. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was the agreement between Grand Trunk and the Canadian government fell through, and Grand Trunk did not want to operate the eastern portion. So the Canadian government was forced to take over the eastern portion, the NTR, and so they changed the name and they called it the Canadian Government Railways, and there was a bunch of other lines that were folded in there as well. So the name of this line changed when it became part of the Canadian Government Railways. It had originally been the Lake Superior branch, or the Lake Superior division of Grand Trunk Pacific. And so in 1915 it became the Fort William subdivision of the Canadian Government Railways, the line being divided into two, the Fort William and the Wraith subdivisions. And then so the line continued to operate under the Canadian Government Railways. There was a whole bunch of improvements and things like that were done during the time of the Canadian Government Railways. And then in 1919, the Canadian Government Railways, along with the Canadian Northern Railway, were merged, amalgamated into a new line, the Canadian National Railways. And so essentially that sort of created a new entity. And so the name of this line changed in 1919. I have to make up these little cards so I can remember all of the name changes. So in 1919 it became the Fort William and Wraith subdivisions of Canadian National Railways. Later that year the whole line was renamed. It became the Lake Superior subdivision of Canadian National Railways, and that was the time when they stopped using this station here and they began using the sort of Canadian Northern station, which was further to the east, sort to the northeast, I guess. In 1923, the name of this line changed to the Canadian National Railways Graham subdivision. And it was around that time that they started making some changes, and so a lot of the lines in this area were abandoned, except for, you can see the bridge in the background over there. In 1924, the line was split into two, so it became the Crest and Graham subdivisions. And in 1925, it was split into three, the Crest, Wraith, and Quorn subdivisions. And then in 1925, the Crest subdivision, which included some of the stuff in this area where we're going to be taking a look at, was abandoned. In 1926, it just became the Wraith and the Quorn subdivision, and in 1931, it reverted back to the Graham subdivision and continued to operate until 1994, when the line was abandoned. So where we are here, we're on Yonge Street. So we're this is all kind of private property once you're getting into here, but you can actually see there's a piece of rail here. Now unfortunately this rail is not, I'm pretty sure this is not Grand Trunk rail. This is actually the Canadian Northern, because if you look at the map, which I'm going to flash up in a second here, okay, is there was a Canadian Northern branch that came off of here that ran through here, that crossed the road up there. I'm pretty sure the Grand Trunk line would have been somewhere in this area here, and so it would have come across and basically cut right through here, linking up with the line that's coming off of the bridge. So really weird arrangement with Grand Trunk. So the station was back over there. They eventually made an agreement with Canadian Pacific, and they also utilized the Canadian Pacific station in Fort William, kind of like a union station, but all of their terminal facilities were to the south, on the south side of the Kaministiquia River, and we're going to be taking a look at that in a separate video. So kind of a really weird arrangement, right? So you know, basically the engines are coming, so the engines and all the rolling stock are coming out of the terminal facility over there where the engine house and the roundhouse were. They're coming across, they're coming into here, and then they're backing into the station over here, and then they're pulling out once again. So just a really weird type of arrangement that they had. Let's just go take a quick look at these rails here. They've been here for a long time. I ain't even gonna try it. Look at the identification, but basically they ran this way, and like I said, they hooked up with the Canadian Northern line, and the Grand Trunk line would have again come in right where that building is there, and then kind of started to curve right through where this junkyard is here, curved, and then met up with the main line right over there. So maybe what I should do right now, trying to see if there's feel any indentations from ties or anything. It's probably all badly turned up by this point. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to flash you up that map so we can have a look at that.